Hello, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to the Joint Institute of Food Science and Technology and Food Authenticity Network webinar. A warm welcome to you all. My name is Sterling Crew. I'll be your chair for today, and I have the great pleasure of being both the chair of the Food Authenticity Network's advisory board and as being the immediate past president of the IFST, and I sit on its board of trustees. And wow, what a fantastic webinar we've got today. One of the best lineups that I've ever seen to deal with food fraud. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I move on to the webinar itself is there will be a Q&A session. So each of the panelists will have an opportunity to talk for 10 minutes about the things that they're really interested in food fraud and a bit about the organizations that they represent. And then that's your opportunity to use the Q&A button down on the screen there. And we'll do the best to get through as many questions that you have. You can vote for questions, so we'll be answering the questions you want. So if you see there's a question you particularly want an answer for, please vote for it. It'll go up to the top, and John Points, who's our moderator in the background, will read it out for the panel. So this is very much your webinar, and you won't get many chances to see a panel like this. We all know how important food fraud is. We all have a shiver that is only 13 years ago, if you can believe it, since the horse meat incident. And one of the things that came out, that one of the very good things is we have a more robust system because we have FAN, we have FIN, and we have the National Food Crime Units, which are all celebrating 10 years this year. So what a great chance to speak to the people who represent those organizations. So we'll have a different perspective for you. Also, it's going to be my absolute pleasure to introduce the people who are there. Professor Chris Elliott himself of the eponymous Elliott Review, well known for everybody in this space. Selvarani Elahai, and Selvarani is the UK government chemist, deputy government chemist, and she's the executive director of the Food Authenticity Network, one of its founders. Stephen French, who many of you will know, who is the scientific policy director at the IFST. We also have Sophie Rollinson, who is the head of food authenticity program in DEFRA. And in fact, I believe that Sophie was also one of the founding members of FAN. Then we have Andy Quinn. Welcome, Andy. He is the head of the National Food Crime Unit at the Food Standards Agency, doing such sterling work there. And Claire Menzies, giving us a commercial perspective, long history in this space, and is president of Inscotec. And then last but not least, we have Emmanuel Lerge. I've been practicing the pronunciation, who is not only co-chair of the Food Industry Intelligence Network, FIN, but she also is technical and quality director at Tesco. So without further ado, we're going to get through as many questions, so please ask as many as you can. I'll hand over to Chris. Chris, are you there?
I most certainly am, and very good to hear from you, Sterling. So thank you for the introduction. Wasn't it quite a coincidence that I wrote the Elliott Review and it happened to be my surname? Just a coincidence. Now, it took me about 18 months to write that. My excuse for taking so long was it was pretty important. And also, did you know food is the biggest manufacturing industry in the UK? It employs over 4 million people, has a turnover of over 150 billion pounds. And I had to talk to many hundreds of people to really gain insights about what actually went wrong. But even more important, what could we do in the future to make our system more resilient to fraud? Sterling already mentioned, in my report, I talked about the 8 pillars of food integrity. I haven't time to go through all 8 of them today, because if I did, Sterling would only start to shout at me. So I'll keep it to the Food Authenticity Network, the Food Industry Intelligence Network, and the National Food Crime Unit. Those were 3 of my big recommendations. I was delighted not only the government supported it, but equally important, academia supported it, and the food industry as well. And what we have are those 3 organizations, and we are well represented by them. They'll give you a bit more details about them, but they are pretty unique, I have to tell you, to the UK. Lots of parts of the world actually are unbelievably envious of those systems and organizations that we have in place that actually work together really closely. And they really do serve to protect us enormously well. I can't take the credit for any of it, even though I would really like to. The credit goes to those people who work unbelievably hard to keep those organizations running and grow in terms of importance and significance. And because, you know, we need them. We need them because fraud has not hasn't gone away, and it's not going to go away. We have even more drivers now of fraud than in the past. We have our climate crisis, and we have crop failures in many parts of the world, which is driving fraud. Massive issues about geopolitics in the world now, another big driver of fraud. And just to give you the recent example of the introduction of all of the tariffs, the global tariffs from the United States, my goodness, what another driver for fraud. Now, I continue to work on this difficult subject of food fraud, but in many, many different parts of the world. Recently, I publish a lot of articles in New Food magazine. If you want to go on to New Food, you'll see lots of articles about fraud in different parts of the world. Just one example, I wrote recently about massive fraud in Vietnam in terms of vegetable oils. It was colossal in scale, about £250 million fraud, this one that was going on. And it was actually about cheating taxes and tariffs, importing animal feed, oils for animal feed, and then relabeling it, going out into the human markets. Quite scandalous. And we see lots of issues about fraud in herbs and spices in lots of different parts of the world, very high value, very complex supply chains as well. Up to date, lots of issues on alternative proteins, all of these things that are going on in different parts of the world, lots of opportunities for cheating there. And a little bit of an insight, one of the frauds we're really looking at closely now is in tomatoes, actually processed tomatoes, be it paste, purees and sauces. So watch this space. Now, my final question that was posed to me, and I'm going to pose it to everybody else in the panel, what's coming next? So I always talk about the 10-year rule. If we talk about the last 30 years in the UK, we had the BSE crisis, we had the Sudan crisis, and we had the horse meat scandal. 3 in the last 30 years. My goodness, we're due another one. What might that one be? Well, I would put my money on meat again, not horse meat this time, but the massive amounts of illegal meat and unsafe meat that is being smuggled into the UK. It is a scandal I have pointed out to government many times, as have other commentators. Most of it is coming through the port of Dover. They are overwhelmed and under-resourced. Last year, I described it as a ticking time bomb. Now I describe it as a very large hand grenade rolling across the UK with a pin out. It's going to explode somewhere. We just don't know where. So watch this space. So with that cheery thought, what I'm going to do now is to pass you on to somebody much more positive than me, is Selvarani Elahi, who's going to talk about FAN amongst other things. So Selvarani, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Always rely on you for some doom and gloom in the world of food crime and food fraud. But some wise words, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you also, Sterling, for the introduction. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. As Chris said, 3 fantastic UK initiatives that all had their 10th anniversary this year. We were delighted to be able to celebrate a decade of food fraud prevention in July this year. And we're very grateful to the IFST for collaborating with us on this event today. So FAN was set up in 2015 and is an open access platform focused on food fraud detection and prevention. The food fraud prevention section contains a whole wealth of information, including links to government-funded research and methods, global tools, guides, and reports on food fraud prevention, trends based on global food fraud report monitoring, and the latest updates on international standardization. That's both in terms of definitions and methods. Since 2015, FAN has grown into an award-winning global network with almost 6,000 members. We're just shy of the 6,000 member mark at the moment, from 116 countries and over 7,300 LinkedIn followers. And because the website is open access, in 2024, over 55,000 unique users also visited the website. It's free and very quick to become a member of FAN, and you can do so by scanning the QR code on many of the slides in this presentation. FAN was set up initially with DEFRA funding, and from 2019, FAN adopted a public-private partnership funding model mainly because the fight against food fraud is a collective responsibility, but also it offers FAN a sustainable funding framework for the future. These are our current partners, and if anybody out there wants to support FAN's work and see their logo up in these lights, you can find further information at this link, together with details on how you can contact us. Funding is required mainly so that we can keep FAN as an open access resource for anyone in the world to access. And this is especially important for SMEs, because I'm sure you know that most of the world's food and drink manufacturers are SMEs who don't have access to a lot of resources. So it's great that we can signpost a global good practice. But the second reason is also to undertake projects to address some global gaps. And I want to quickly highlight 3 partner projects we've carried out in the last few years. The first one is our database search tool. So for authenticity, in order to determine whether something is authentic, you need to compare it to a reference data set, that somebody has constructed to say this is what good looks like for them. But data sharing is a big barrier to the uptake of food authenticity methods, and there's still very little visibility of what food authenticity data exists and where it exists. So under one of our partner projects, we created a database of authenticity databases where you can search by commodity or test. And currently there are 220 different food authenticity databases listed in our database. It's available on the FAN website at the link shown there. The second project is our compendium of analytical explainers, because I'm sure you all know that scientists love to use acronyms and jargon, which can be very confusing for non-scientists who have to make use of analytical results and make decisions on them. So this compendium seeks to undertake some of that science translation, and it's organized into the main categories of techniques typically used for food authenticity testing. And for each technique, the following are described: the principle of the technique, uses and applications, strengths, watch-outs, and results interpretation. And the compendium is also available freely at the link shown. Our third project is really speaking to what Chris said in his introduction. I think we all agree we're in a higher risk environment that's conducive of more food fraud events likely to happen. So we have to be ever increasingly vigilant. So how do we do this? Well, one way is to monitor global food fraud reports, and many people subscribe to such services. However, there are many tools out there, and often data is collected and curated in different ways with sometimes differing outputs, and this can be confusing to stakeholders. So FAN collaborated with 3 of the world's largest food fraud incident collation tool providers, shown here, and we publish annual reports on things that include, for example, this was the 2024 data for the top 10 commodities that are most commonly reported as being fraudulent by official regulatory agencies across the world. And with that data, then we've done some trending to answer the question, well, is food fraud increasing? And you'll hear differing views from different people, depending on where they are in the world. But we're looking at our data from global regulators all across the world. We've shown that the global regulatory activity on food fraud has remained broadly similar since January 2023 to date. A quarterly dashboard of this data is sent to our FAN, Platinum and Gold funding partners. In addition to the 3 projects I spoke about, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that in collaboration with our government partners, we signpost to 22 food authenticity centres of expertise. And these are organised into the categories shown there. And for every centre of expertise, there's a named contact, telephone number and email address. And this was certainly not the case during the 2013 horse meat incident, when people weren't really sure who to turn to. We worked with these centres of expertise and the UK government to produce a framework for how we could all work together to give government a collective technical view in a timely manner so evidence-based decisions can be made to minimise the impact of future incidents. So looking forward towards the future, we've published the FAN 2025 to 2027 strategy, and our vision is to work towards a world where collaboration and shared best practices in food fraud detection and prevention create a safer, more transparent and trusted global food supply for all consumers. We hope to achieve this by continuing to cultivate a global community committed to advancing and sharing best practices in food fraud detection and prevention, helping ensure integrity, transparency, and the trustworthiness of food systems for consumers worldwide. We hope to do this in the immediate future by leveraging two existing collaborations. One is with the Global Alliance on Food Crime, where we hope to embed FAN further into the countries that we work with, such as the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then secondly, a Horizon Europe project called the European Food Fraud Community of Practice, in which FAN is a partner leading on the needs assessment. And through this project, we're hoping to instill FAN through Europe and the rest of the world. Just lastly, my thanks to our partners, the advisory board, and our small but talented executive team. And just to remember that anyone can join FAN for free, so please do pass this on to your networks. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll now hand over to Stephen, who's going to talk to you about the IFST. Thank you.
Thank you, Salvarani. Hope you can hear me clearly. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm the Scientific Policy Director at the Institute of Food Science and Technology. And prior to working at the IFST, I also spent almost 20 years working in various scientific and regulatory roles at Mars Incorporated. So although I'm not working on a day-to-day basis managing food fraud, I've certainly lived through several of the major incidents that Chris mentioned, including horse meat and the melamine scandal, which really hit the pet food industry very hard during my time at Mars. So I certainly appreciate the very serious nature of the fraud that is going on, the impacts on food manufacturers, but also on the wider food safety concerns as well. So as Salvarani has already covered, IFST are very proud to be working with FAN and other partners. And we share many values, I think, in terms of our aims to disseminate high quality and independent materials. And for those who are not aware, the IFST is the UK's leading professional body for those involved in food science and technology. We're an internationally respected membership body, and we support our members through knowledge sharing, but also through professional recognition. And our membership comprises a very wide range of backgrounds, from students through to long seasoned experts in the food sector. And Ange will post, I think later, some more details about IFST, how to get involved, and some of the work that we are involved with. But as a membership body, we very much rely on the expertise of our 3,800 and plus members, and who work across all of the disciplines related to the food sector, to help us really curate and develop high quality materials that we can disseminate to our members, but also to the wider public. So I thought it'd be useful, just in the context of this look back of 10 years and look forward, just to summarize a little bit of the resources that IFST have created over that period of time. And I think the first interesting thing of note is the number of topics related to food fraud, food defense, but also more broadly, I think similar to FAN, related to testing, analytical techniques, and so on. And I think we're seeing certainly that there's more and more interest in these areas, and I think the number of materials that we have developed certainly is as a result of the interest and concerns of our members. So I think from this, it's also quite interesting to note, I think, some of the trends in terms of the types of areas that we're now starting to look at. And I think certainly in the more recent years, focusing more on genetics of food processing, artificial intelligence, new technologies and food safety considerations. So I think that probably gives us a bit of a clue in terms of where some of the potential food fraud, food defense areas for the future will come from. And you'll see right at the top in the center, we have developed two specific resources around food defense and food fraud, which give readers a framework that they can look at to try and help determine the key risks, and also to start to develop a plan for working within any particular area. And so I think, just to say as a conclusion, we very much rely on the expertise of our members, many of whom are on the panel and I'm sure in the audience today. So a big thank you to everybody who contributes to this, and also a call for those on the call. If anybody would like to get more involved with IFST and help us steer what this next 10 years looks like in terms of our work, then again, Ange will share some more details towards the end of this meeting and allow us to hopefully connect with you for the future. So I'm now going to hand on to Sophie.
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, everyone. So I was just going to talk about the government's food authenticity programme and highlight some of the trends and themes that have emerged over the last 10 years in terms of developing tools to verify food authenticity, which is what the programme aims to do. Okay, so looking back at the sort of type of projects that we've commissioned over the last 10 years, I'd say the majority are still around sort of individual authenticity issues and developing new methods to look at those. But there's definitely been a shift over recent years to do more on knowledge transfer under the programme. So that's about rolling out methods and advice to laboratories. And we've certainly got a more strategic approach doing that now, joining up with other funders and looking at emerging needs. We've also moved to do a lot more activity on standardisation, harmonisation of methods. I think reflecting again the need to be more joined up and, where possible, to have widely accepted or recognised common approaches to issues. We've had more projects that look at developing and providing best practice advice for analysts, whether on things like how to validate methods, how to build databases, developing real-time PCR assays, interpreting results from DNA sequencing, those sort of topics. And I think that reflects the sort of wide range of methodologies and techniques now available to look at food authenticity, and a sort of shift in our role in supporting fitness for purpose testing with advice on the application of those methods and sort of some of the underpinning science challenges around them, rather than developing a lot of individual methods for very specific authenticity issues. And I'd say FAN's been instrumental in disseminating that best practice and highlighting it to a relevant audience. So in terms of the types of technologies and methods that we've looked at, the majority have been DNA-based, and I think that's an area where there's been huge progress over the last 10 years, and it's really the gold standard for testing for things like species and variety. I think there's been particular progress around being able to have now accurate quantitative methods, DNA methods that are reproducible, and we're now looking under the programme at sort of newer DNA technologies, so next generation sequencing and the sort of opportunities that might offer for food authenticity testing. I think one of the big shifts around methods has really been the move from targeted to non-targeted approaches. And we've done a lot to look at the sort of challenges around how you can validate non-targeted methods, and ensuring the databases that they rely on are fit for purpose. So in terms of the sort of commodities that we've focused on, meat is still the main one there, and I think that reflects obviously the impact of the horse meat incident and the need for good quantitative, well-validated tests to look at meat fraud. But more recently, we've looked at issues like alternative proteins, ways to verify novel foods, honey authenticity, herbs and spices, and those sort of commodities. So one of the sort of flagship projects under the programme that's had a really big impact has been the Food Authenticity Network. And I think, as we've heard earlier, originally established with some DEFRA funding and a concept that came out of the Elliott Review. I'm very pleased that DEFRA is still able to support it. And from a government perspective, the value has really been in putting us in a good place in terms of preparedness for future incidents, with the amount of resources and information that's curated on the network and is sort of accessible to a community that's interested in food authenticity. And also the works I've already talked about around bringing the centres of expertise together, this network of lab that has specific expertise in authenticity issues. So moving on to sort of the future direction. So I know others will talk about or have already talked about some of the changing food supply chain landscapes and the impact on food fraud opportunities. We had a workshop with our expert committees last year to try and map out what those drivers were and the potential impacts. And then some of the technical needs that we identified from that workshop were around the need for validated methods to authenticate novel foods and new food production processes, sort of cultivated meat, and potential opportunities for using new technologies, sort of artificial intelligence and digital tools combined with sort of more typical analytical lab-based methods to look at things like traceability and origin. We think non-targeted methods will still continue to evolve, and there'll still be a need for authentic reference samples and databases to underpin these, and a need to sort of encourage transparency and sharing of those where possible. I think it's quite difficult to predict where the next food fraud issue might hit, and working out what horizon scanning signals actually turn into a problem is a difficult thing to do. And therefore, there's going to be a need for flexible methods that can look at lots of particular possible authenticity issues simultaneously. So screening for lots of different issues, and potentially sort of point of contact devices that can look at issues in the field, and then could be followed up with confirmatory tests in a laboratory. And we're going to need to support that with more rapid method development, allowing us to respond quickly to any emerging threats. I think in some cases there will still need to be very specific methods developed to support any future legislative changes around food labelling and food standards. And I think there's going to continue to be a need for networks and collaboration, which sort of brings me nicely back around to the Food Authenticity Network and the important role that I think that's going to have over the next 10 years in terms of supporting activities around food fraud and food authenticity. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm now going to hand over to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to both IFST and FAN for the opportunity to be a part of this webinar. As the Deputy Director responsible for the National Food Crime Unit as part of the Food Standards Agency, I'm responsible for ensuring our team tackles serious fraud and related criminality within food supply chains. We normally investigate offences appropriate for prosecution under the Fraud Act or conspiracy to defraud under common law. And our unit covers England, Wales and Northern Ireland, although we work very closely with our Scottish counterparts in the Scottish Food Crime and Incidents Unit to provide a joined-up UK approach to food crime. As has been mentioned, since our inception in 2015, following the horse meat scandal and the subsequent Elliott recommendations, we have published an initial baseline assessment on food crime and then 3 further food crime strategic assessments, with the most recent being released in September of last year. And these assessments are based on a wide range of intelligence sources. From these assessments, we review them each year at our control strategy priority meetings, and this helps us to focus and prioritise what work we will take on, based on around 2,000 or so pieces of new information that we receive each year. This year, for the first time, we have in our control strategy priorities a category that we refer to as supply chains presenting high levels of authenticity risk to the UK. And this includes supply chains relating to herbs and spices, honey, edible oils and organic products. However, our response to any food crime is determined by assessing the gravity of it, including considerations of the degree of planning and coordination in committing it, the impact of the crime across geographical regions or indeed international countries, the financial loss caused and any other harm caused to the public and industry. If the crime has a big impact in any of these areas, it's more likely that we will adapt it as an NFCU operation. In most of our cases, though, we work extremely closely with local authority partners, including both training standards and environmental health professionals. We've come a long way since 2015, from a relatively small intelligence capability of around 15 staff in 2015 to the current headcount of 81.5 full-time equivalent that provide a full end-to-end law enforcement capability. We've got accredited intelligence and investigation officers, including accredited financial investigators that are able to make cash seizures from suspects, restrain suspects' assets, and make applications for confiscation orders to ensure food criminals do not financially benefit from their offending. We've got a sensitive intelligence unit able to confidentially deal with sensitive sources of information, such as whistleblowers and confidential human intelligence sources. We have officers trained in conducting static surveillance and conducting covert online investigations under directed surveillance authorities. We have dedicated teams responsible for engaging with both industry partners and other stakeholders, like the many local authorities that we work closely with. We map and share details of our organised crime groups and share our performance data on national disruptions with the National Crime Agency. We have access to policing computer systems, including the Police National Computer, the Police National Intelligence Database, and the automated number plate recognition systems. In addition to conducting criminal investigations, we also have a prevention team that work hard to reduce the likelihood and the impact of food crime. They deliver tailored crime prevention and reduction programs and look to create opportunities to work with all sizes of businesses to raise their awareness of their own vulnerabilities to food crime and the consequences thereof, either as victims or perpetrators. Our most recent new capability was our food crime officers being granted from the 1st of May this year with specific powers under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, meaning that we can now operate more independently without having to rely on the police all the time. We have circa 10 or so live test operations at any given time at various stages, ranging from initial inquiries through to awaiting court hearings, and have another 20 or so more cases in the intelligence development stage. The types of crime that we focus on include the use of stolen food in the supply chain, unlawful slaughter, diversion of unsafe food, adulteration, substitution or misrepresentation of food, and of course document fraud. Operation Bantam was a case that recently concluded in the courts with 4 men and a food business being convicted for their respective roles in a fraud involving the diverting of animal byproducts back into the human food chain. These products were not fit for human consumption, and in addition, the offenders were selling some of this as a halal when it clearly did not comply with those religious requirements. The main offender was a millionaire and an owner of an ABP business in Somerset, who was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, with a judge stating that this criminality was purely motivated by his greed. Our Operation Aspen is also drawing to a close, with the one offender in this case recently pleading guilty to handling stolen poultry worth in excess of £500,000. The offender was the owner of a cold store in Wigan, and he knowingly allowed the stolen food items to be stored and dispatched from his business premises for financial gain. This poultry had in fact been acquired by fraudsters from victim businesses based on mainland Europe that had been deceived into believing that they were dealing with a legitimate UK-based food business and provided goods on credit without doing the requisite due diligence checks. The sentence of this case is expected actually later this month. We have a number of other cases currently with the Crown Prosecution Service. These cases involve the alleged misrepresentation of potatoes as being of a premium brand when they were not, involved the misrepresentation of imported Norwegian frozen salmon as being RSPCA fresh Scottish salmon, and involved the misrepresentation of the country of origin of meat products which claim to be produced from British livestock when allegedly large amounts of it originate from Europe and South America. As for the future, our food crime strategic assessment sets out a whole host of future risks to food supply chains, ranging from those caused by adverse weather conditions and geopolitical tensions, through to changes at our own borders, as alluded to by Mr. Elliott earlier. Alongside this are the concerns about the availability of government funds to maintain our local authorities, who are pivotal to protecting the food that we all eat. Our immediate future is very much focused on doing more of the same, with the balance right between the number of serious cases that we take on that we progress through criminal justice systems and the amount of effort we can demonstrate in preventing food fraud from occurring in the first place. What is most definitely needed is greater cooperation and collaboration with partners both here and abroad. We currently engage with international partners through a number of routes, including direct relationships with some countries. For example, we have recently signed a memorandum of understanding with our Italian counterparts. Each year we contribute to the Europol-led Operation Opson, and in addition we are members of the Global Alliance on Food Crime that Silvrani mentioned earlier, which involves representatives from our counterparts in the USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, where we have developed an action plan to progress joined-up work on several strands. A recent example of this being the production of a problem profile relating to a particular food item And at our next meeting, we will be discussing and agreeing next steps in relation to the recommendations from that profile. Finally, can I finish by saying how grateful we are for the ongoing support provided by the Food Authenticity Network in relation to the work of the NFCU. They support us in a number of ways, including signposting their members to our alerts about food crime matters. In addition, FAN very kindly promotes on their web pages the work of the Global Alliance on Food Crime. I'll now hand over to Claire, who will share some of her thoughts from 30 years of food manufacturing experience in the food fraud prevention world.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Andy. As Sterling mentioned at the top of the webinar, my name's Claire Menezes. I'm president at Inscotec, and here at Inscotec, we look to expose and prevent food fraud by ground truthing supply chains, applying forensic intelligence to uncover hidden actors, look for economic incentives and risks that, quite frankly, are not covered by conventional audits. It's my real pleasure to be part of this celebratory event today, so thank you to all the organisers for the invitation. I've had the privilege of working closely with FAN and the IFST for a number of years now, and when thinking about this webinar, I was reflecting on how far we've come with that collaboration, as well as some of the hard-earned lessons that we've learned along the way. From personal experience, many of those insights have emerged in the aftermath of a crisis. Often that's the first time we're made aware of a fraud issue. One of the earliest exposures of food fraud for me, coming from the spice industry, was, of course, the illegal dye or dyes, because there were a number of incidents over the years where Sudan 1, an industrial dye intended for the textile and shoe industry, was illicitly added to chili powder, then making its way into Worcester sauce flavouring, before ending up in hundreds of processed foods in the UK and beyond. I remember it vividly because products were being announced live on breakfast TV, hundreds of them scrolling across the bottom of a screen in a broadcast that seemed to be never ending. It made front page news in tabloids and non-tabloids, and in the company I was working at the time, we received more letters of concern from consumers in a week than we would do in a month, with genuine concern as to whether there were going to be health implications from eating any of these products. What made it so impactful wasn't just the scale, it was the shock that a banned carcinogen had entered the food chain intentionally and illegally, completely undetected. I think it exposed not just to industry, but also to the broader public, just how vulnerable our trusted food systems were to fraud. And it today still remains the largest recall in the UK's history. Now, a lot has changed since that particular incident. We doubled down as an industry. There have been genuine advancements in analytical tools, clearer definitions around food fraud, which is all great. But on a practical level, the food industry still today leans heavily on testing as a primary mitigation strategy. It's become somewhat of a comfort blanket, if you will. And yet, despite all that we've learned, our solutions are not disruptive enough. Food fraud is still happening, and if we're serious about being disruptive, we need to look deeper at the architecture of our food systems and their origins. These systems were built on trust and designed to manage known safety hazards, whether that's microbiological, physical, or chemical, and I think they've done a pretty good job at that, but they were never engineered to detect fraud. And that's the inherent flaw. And unless we challenge that and rethink how our systems operate, I think we could risk seeing more food safety issues emerge as an indirect consequence of fraud. Trying to remain positive and looking to the next 10 years, staying ahead of food fraud will demand deeper due diligence, smarter technology for sure, stronger governance, and a culture that encourages challenge, not just compliance. At Inscotech, we believe the key lies in intelligence, i.e. ground truthing supply chains, embracing more oppositional thinking, and investing in AI tools built for fragmented and opaque systems. Tailored solutions will matter too. You heard Andy talk about the many different types of food crime. So, for example, maybe education would be a good start for opportunistic crimes. More than likely, some high-tech traceability solution would work much better for maybe grey market disruption. So I may be leaving you with more questions than answers. Sorry about that, but there is no one size fits all fix here, which is exactly why we need to keep challenging assumptions, collaborating across sectors, learning what we can from non-food industries where they've been more successful in bringing down crime, doing events like these, and championing disruptive approaches that reflect the complexity of the problem that is food fraud. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Emmanuelle, who I believe will be sharing some insights on FIN.
Thank you, Claire, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Emmanuelle Lerges. I am the Technical and Quality Director at Tesco, but I'm also a board member and co-chair of FIN, which is a Food Industry Intelligence Network. And I feel really, really privileged to be attending this webinar today. So massive thank you to the IFST and to FAN for organising it. I'm gonna start by, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but back in September last year, actually, the Joint Research Centre published a report emphasising the need for a holistic, digital and risk-based approach to food fraud. And the report specifically called out, had a specific recommendation about the creation of an independent data trust to facilitate secure data sharing between industry and regulator. And actually, it's precisely kind of what the model of FIN is and what we've established in the UK. And to date, FIN remains quite unique globally, providing like a proven framework almost for collaborative intelligence sharing in the fight against food fraud. So FIN was established in response to the 2013 horse meat scandal and the Elliott review that followed up from that. And at the time, Chris Elliott called out for a safe haven for intelligence sharing to be set up. And 21 founding members from across the industry, so this was from retail, from manufacturing, from food service, came together and launched FIN back in 2015. So we actually celebrated the 10 years of FIN earlier this year, which was a great milestone for us and a good reminder of the last 10 years. So very much hand in hand with the event today. And over that time, we've developed some really robust processes and governance, which allows the members to actually share anonymous data. And it took us quite a bit of time to actually build the trust to be able to do that. But now we're able to share anonymously that data. And we've also in time formalized partnership with the regulators. So we actually meet on a quarterly basis with Food Standards Scotland, with NFCU, even with the FSAI in Ireland, which has resulted in a really structured two-way process for sharing insight and holding kind of those multi-agency intelligence meetings. And it's fair to say it hasn't necessarily been plain sailing. There were loads of concerns in the building of FIN, especially around confidentiality of data, around funding, and just resource allocations more generally. But I think our experience is showing that when you put your mind to it, you can really make it happen. So a little bit of how we actually operate, and this is a really simplified way of trying to explain it. But basically, our FIN members will submit data on their raw materials and ingredient testing. And this is both analytical testing, but it's also supply chain tracing activities. So we collect both types of data. those data sets are submitted to our legal host, and they anonymize all of the inputs. And then these inputs are aggregated into a big anonymized data set that then helps us generate reports and insights that are shared back with the membership on a quarterly basis. And this approach allows us to ensure that sensitive information remains completely confidential whilst enabling kind of really meaningful analysis. So the way we fund it is through a tiered member subscription, and it's supported by both some technology and operational partners, which ensures both the affordability and the robustness of the infrastructure. And we're overseen by a governing board, of which I am a member, and I'm the co-chair alongside with Kirsten Williams from Barfoot. And we're supported by a legal host. And we've also got a board advisor. So Chris Elliott used to be our board advisor up until last year and did a brilliant job at guiding us through our journey. And Chris stepped down from the board last year and was replaced by Professor Saskia van Ruth, who's our new academic advisor. And Saskia is the she's a professor of food supply chain integrity at the University College of Dublin, and she's been absolutely brilliant in kind of making us think slightly differently as we move forward. So the value of FIN, just try and build this up, is in both the individual insights that we get from the data, but very importantly from the collective insight. We've now got 70 members that represent a very large part of the food industry in the UK. And to date, we remain the largest authenticity database in the world, with over 400,000 kind of actual data points from actual kind of testing. And what's been really interesting to watch actually is that we get about 50,000 results a year. In the last quarter, we can see that the testing and the traceabilities have ramped up very significantly. So there is clearly a lot more focus across the supply chain in this space. But by viewing the data both collectively, industry and regulators can identify the trends and the risks that would not necessarily be visible to individual organizations. So it's enabling a more informed and proactive decision making. And then beyond the data sharing, we also do a lot of additional activities. So we offer regular training and events, and a number of our members have shared some case studies around issues that they've had to face. We also run coordinated testing programs on high-risk commodities, and more recently, we've run some on edible oils, on rice, and on spices a bit more specifically. And all of these initiatives help members stay ahead of emerging threats, but also to foster a culture of continuous learning and improvement. And then in the last couple of years, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how we broaden our reach, recognizing that not all businesses are able to join FIN, and particularly SMEs. And we were challenged by Professor Elliott following one of the latest kind of meat scandal. And so this year, after a couple of years of working through how we would do it, we launched FIN SME Hub. So this is a free resource that's available on the website, which provide access to committee watch list, to tailored tools and news, but also confidential links to the regulators. And our aim in this space is to really ensure that that intelligence and support is accessible to as many across the supply chain as possible, regardless of business side. And we're really committed to continuing our effort in this space. So a little bit on what we're looking at going forward. Obviously, continued collaboration across the breadth of the industry is really, really important. I think it served us really well to date, especially in terms of our collaboration with the regulators. I think we've got more opportunities to collaborate across industry bodies as well. So this is something that we're looking at the moment. We've talked earlier, and some of us have shared around kind of the importance of data, but data quality, and importantly, how we enhance insight through the use of AI is going to be absolutely critical as we move forward. And there's a lot of work in this space. And then we're going to continue joining forces through expanding our collaborative testing. I think what it helps doing is just joining up all of the resources from our members to look at things in slightly different ways. And then we'll continue building capability through training and case studies whilst expanding our reach through the SME hub. So just before I leave you, I just actually wanted to leave you with a thought and a challenge a little bit, which I know is for you to ask us questions, but this is a question I want to ask to all of you. Most organizations have got risk assessments, they've got monitoring of programs in place, whether it's through traceabilities or analytical tools. But how well do you really know your supply chains? And how often do you ask yourself that question? Not just your immediate supply chain, just up one stage in that supply chain, but every link of that chain all the way to the actual source of your products and your ingredients. Do you know who owns those companies? Have you done any reputational checks on them? Have you investigated any allegations that they may have had in the past? And I think today, with the digital tools that are available, I think those questions can be answered a little bit at our fingertips. I think it's easier than ever to conduct some of that background research. And as supply chains become more and more challenged, more and more under pressure because of geopolitics, because of climate change, I would strongly encourage you to look at it in the more details if you're not doing so already. I think it's probably one of the most effective steps that we can take to protect businesses and more importantly, our customers and our consumers. So this is it from me. I'm going to hand you back over to Sterling to kick off the Q&A.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Who would have thought that Fin could exist? When I go around the world and talk to other governments, people just cannot believe Fin exists. They don't understand the level of trust and people sharing information or FAN or a specific National Food Crime Unit. So congratulations to you all for doing an amazing job. I think that's a great place to end it, Andy. Before I thank everyone, that resonates with everyone. I hope that we are the ears and eyes of the food industry. We're all in there to make it better for consumers, and using the Food Crime Unit, using FAN or using FIN are the ways that we can bring this to the attention of the authorities to make sure that we're protecting the public and our nation. Can I just say what a fantastic panel we managed to get together today. Really great insights, and thank you each for sharing your experiences, which I think we're all a lot better educated at the end of it and more motivated. So can I thank all the panelists on your behalf? I see lots of hands going up, clapping you guys. Very well done. Can I thank the IFST? Can I also thank FAN for arranging this webinar? I hope it's the first of many to come. Can I congratulate the Food Crime Unit, FIN and FAN on your 10th anniversary? And what a huge opportunity to thank Professor Chris Elliott, who really started this ball rolling with his Elliott Review. And it's one of the few reviews I've seen from the government that actually was bought into by the sector, bought into by the public, government, and actually produced change, which is the most important thing. So can I just remind everyone that there are continual professional development points available at the end of this. And just to encourage you, if you're not a member of the IFST, you might want to consider joining. It's a huge resource on food authenticity as well as food safety and innovation. And also FAN as well. It's a free open access resource. Selvarani put the code up there, but you can also just look up FAN in your search engine. It's absolutely free and you've got access to all that information. So at the end, thank you everybody for turning up. So thank you very much once again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Well done.